Arieth IV had once been a quiet, peaceful colony floating on the warm edge of the nebula spine. A world known for its gentle blue oceans, crystal plains, and slow-moving winds that carried the scent of glowing flowers through alien villages. But all of that beauty had turned into a nightmare when the planet's atmosphere began to fail, thinning slowly at first, then collapsing in violent bursts that tore through sky domes and cracked the protective layers the colonists relied on. Storms formed. Every few hours, each stronger than the last, ripping towers from their foundations and sending entire districts into chaos as heat waves burned through once cool landscapes. Wildlife died in piles. Oxygen levels dropped so low that even the strongest lungs gasped for breath, and families huddled in small underground shelters built for short emergencies, not extinction-level collapse, and through it all, the colony leaders sent distress signals. First polite requests, then urgent warnings, then desperate screams, broadcasting across all council frequencies, begging for help, begging for support, begging for someone to hear their voices as their world died around them. But the galaxy watched, and did nothing. The Galactic Council, the great union of starfaring civilizations who claimed to protect all member worlds, held meeting after meeting about Arieth IV and voted every time to deny intervention, marking the colony as non-essential, low priority, not economically relevant. Words that hid the truth. Arieth IV was small, poor, and inconvenient, and saving it brought no benefit to the powerful empires. So the Council chose silence, burying the distress calls under political reports, ensuring the galaxy never truly heard Arieth IV's cry for help. As weeks passed, the colony's atmosphere grew thinner, and children began fainting in school shelters, their tiny bodies unable to process the loss of oxygen, their parents forced to pump manual air vents just to keep them awake. And when the heat storms came, sweeping through the streets like burning oceans, entire families locked themselves underground, praying for the winds to stop, praying for the council to change their minds, praying for anything at all to save them from a death that felt slow, cruel, and forgotten. The sky cracked open with red lightning that danced across boiling clouds, lightning so hot it melted metal frames of buildings and split roads into rivers of fire. But still the council remained silent, still the galaxy remained blind, still no one came. One night, when the storms grew so violent that even underground shelters shook like they were being torn open by invisible claws, the colony governor made one final broadcast, his voice trembling as he spoke, "Arieth IV is dying. Anyone who hears us, please, we beg you. This is our last night." And across the shelters children cried softly, their voices fading into the rumble of the collapsing world. Mothers whispered broken lullabies to keep them calm. Fathers stared at the ceiling, waiting for the final impact, waiting for the storms to break through, waiting for death they could not fight. And just when all hope had truly died, just when the sky split open one last time and revealed only fire, a sound echoed through the clouds, a low, deep hum, like a starship descending, but much, much larger than anything Arieth IV had ever seen. The colonists lifted their heads, tears still on their faces, as the orange fire sky suddenly shifted to blue light, soft, calm, cooling light that spilled down from above, pushing the burning clouds aside like curtains opening on a stage. Someone in the shelter screamed, "Something is coming. Something is coming from the sky," and panic flashed through the room until a child whispered, voice trembling, "Is it, help?" And then they heard it. The unmistakable sound of Terran thrusters cutting through chaos, the heavy pulse of human-engineered engines slicing through the red storm like a blade through water, and the sky tore open again, not with fire this time, but with hope. A Terran relief ship descended first, white hull glowing against the burning atmosphere, then a second, then a third, then 50 more emerging from the darkness of space like a shining swarm of angels, each one shaped not like a warship, but like a lifeboat built for saving worlds, their blue lights illuminating the dead sky as thousands of colonists crawled out of their shelters, staring up in disbelief. But it did not end there. As the relief fleet descended, the sky darkened again, not from smoke, but from a shadow so massive it swallowed the burning horizon, a silhouette larger than any starship Arieth IV's citizens had ever imagined, a colossal Terran humanitarian dreadnought, black and silver, covered in glowing blue veins of energy, descending like a giant shield sent from the heavens. Its thrusters shook the planet gently, its hangars opening like wings, releasing medical shuttles, atmospheric stabilizers, water processors, and emergency habitat domes, everything Arieth IV needed to survive. all deployed in perfect formation, all landing with precision that made the colonists fall to their knees in disbelief. And when the dreadnought finally broke through the last layer of clouds and hovered above the dying cities, its lights washed over the cracked ground, cooling the burning air, calming the screaming winds, and its speakers activated with a single, soft message broadcast across the entire planet. Ariath 4, we heard your call, spoken in that calm, steady, warm Terran tone that carried not pity but partnership, not dominance but care, not superiority but solidarity. Colonists sobbed in disbelief. Children lifted their hands toward the sky as if reaching for the ship, and then the dreadnought added a second message, a sentence that would become one of the most famous lines in HFY history, "You are not alone." And that sentence spread across the planet like a heartbeat, echoing through broken streets, passing through collapsed buildings, reaching even the darkest underground shelters where families cried in relief because someone, finally, someone, had come for them. And as Terran med teams rushed across the ground, carrying oxygen tanks, stabilizer pods, thermal blankets, food packs, water extractors, and emergency robotics, the colonists realized something even more shocking. The humans were running into danger, rushing toward collapsing structures, lifting injured people with their bare hands, pulling families from burning debris, fighting the storms with their own bodies just to save strangers from another world. And while the council watched the chaos from their cold, distant chambers with tight lips and nervous eyes, humanity worked without hesitation, without fear, without complaint, as if every life on Ariath mattered to them personally. The colony governor, still trembling, approached a Terran officer and whispered, Why did you come? Why us? We have nothing to offer." And the Terran officer, covered in dust and sweat but smiling gently, replied, "Because no one else came. That's enough reason." And those words hit the governor harder than any storm, harder than the council's betrayal, harder than the death surrounding them, because it revealed the truth that Ariath 4 had forgotten in their suffering. Somewhere out in the galaxy, a species still cared, still listened, still ran toward the fire instead of away from it. News of the Terran intervention spread across the galaxy like a shockwave, exposing the Council's abandonment, sparking outrage across dozens of worlds, and while politicians argued and empires panicked, the humans ignored them all and kept working, stabilizing the atmosphere with massive drone towers, cooling the planet with cloud-seeding vessels, repairing life support infrastructure with advanced nanoforge units, and comforting terrified children with warm blankets and soft smiles. And as night fell on Ariath 4 for the first time in weeks without flames tearing through the sky, thousands gathered in the central plaza, watching as the Terran dreadnought illuminated the city with soft, blue light, a beacon of safety in a world that had forgotten what safety felt like, and for the first time since the disaster began, hope bloomed in the hearts of the colonists. Not because their world was saved yet, but because someone finally cared enough to try. And as the humans stood guard around the shelters, as medics worked through the night, as atmospheric towers hummed to life, the colony governor looked up at the massive Terran dreadnought and whispered to himself, to his people, to the galaxy listening, "We were left to die, but humanity stood with us." And that was the moment the galaxy changed forever as Terran relief ships spread across Ariath 4 delivering oxygen tanks, water processors, emergency shelters, and medical units. The rest of the galaxy watched in stunned disbelief, because no one, not a single empire, not a single council fleet, not a single rich world, had responded to the colony's cries, yet humanity had arrived with overwhelming force, not with weapons, not with soldiers, but with compassion, resources, and machines designed to hold a dying planet together. And this sudden display of Terran unity sparked panic across the Galactic Council, whose members scrambled behind sealed doors, arguing over how Earth reached the colony so fast, how they deployed a dreadnought-class humanitarian vessel without authorization, and whether humanity was acting out of kindness or power. Yet outside those walls, on the ground where people were actually dying, everything was different. Alien parents stared in shock as Terran medics knelt beside their suffocating children, placing respirators over tiny mouths and whispering softly, "Breathe slowly, we're here now." And those gentle words brought tears to the eyes of hardened colonists because no one in the galaxy had spoken with such warmth in years. In the ruins of the West District, a Terran rescue team carried an entire shelter of elderly aliens on their backs through collapsing debris while the storm winds tore at their suits, and people wept openly when they saw humans covering alien children with their own armored bodies to protect them from heated dust storms, pushing through the burning air without hesitation. Above them, the Terran humanitarian dreadnought activated massive atmospheric stabilizers that pulsed blue energy into the sky, pushing the boiling clouds upward and cooling the air, a sight so spectacular that thousands emerged from their underground shelters just to watch the sky turn from blood red to calm blue under Terran technology. Meanwhile, the Council broadcast emergency warnings claiming Earth was violating sovereign rescue protocols. But the galaxy ignored those messages completely when videos of Terran engineers fixing collapsed air filtration systems went viral. One clip showed a human kneeling in front of a terrified alien child, handing her a warm thermal blanket and saying, "It's okay, you're safe now," and that moment shattered the pride of 1,000 worlds who had done nothing but watch. The Council's panic escalated when they realized the truth. Humanity's arrival was more than just a rescue. It was a message, a silent declaration that Earth would not obey the Council's cold orders anymore, and the chairwoman shouted in fear, not anger. If humans gain influence by saving Ariath 4, the Council will lose control. But far from the political halls, on the dying ground of Ariath 4, the reality was much simpler. An alien father held his unconscious son while a Terran doctor injected stabilizing serum into the boy's veins, whispering, "Stay with me, stay with me. I've got you." And when the boy opened his eyes, the father broke down sobbing, hugging the human doctor like a brother, because in the darkest hour of their existence, it was not their own council who saved them, it was humanity. And as night fell once more, the Terran dreadnought deployed massive shield domes over the remaining districts, producing a soft blue glow that pushed the storms away and filled the damaged city with a peaceful hum, a sound that soothed the terrified colonists who had forgotten what calm felt like. Then something happened that sent shockwaves across the entire galaxy. The colonists began chanting softly near the dreadnought, first in small groups, then in thousands, "Thank you, Earth. Thank you, humans," their voices trembling with gratitude so raw that even Terran soldiers felt their throats tighten. And when the Council saw the footage, they panicked further, realizing humanity had not come for power, yet the galaxy was giving it to them anyway. Inside his field tent, the Terran commander watched the grateful crowds with silent eyes, and when his second-in-command asked, "Sir, why did we come?" "The Council abandoned this world," he replied softly, "because they deserved someone to come." And those words became the emotional heartbeat of the mission, repeated across the colony as humans worked tirelessly through the night, repairing wind shelters, reviving failing generators, bringing breath back to a suffocating world, while the Council's private channels boiled over with fury, fear, and confusion, unable to understand a species who risked their own lives for people who had nothing to offer. And as dawn rose over Ariath 4, revealing the first calm sky in months, thousands of colonists stood outside the Terran shield domes, staring up at the huge human dreadnought with expressions of awe, knowing without a doubt that the galaxy had abandoned them, but humanity had not. And that simple truth changed everything as Terran engineers stabilized Ariath 4's atmosphere and medics worked through the night saving family after family. Something strange kept bothering the Terran commander. Why had the colony's systems failed so suddenly, so completely, and why had no Council ship even attempted to respond? So while rescue efforts continued, a group of Terran analysts entered the old administrative tower searching for the original atmospheric control logs, and what they found inside the ruined data center froze their blood. Entire directories were missing, distress transmission logs were deleted, and the last 3 years of weather control data had been overwritten, replaced with encrypted files stamped with the Galactic Council signature, a signature that meant only one thing. Ariath 4 hadn't been ignored, it had been deliberately silenced. As the Terrans dug deeper, they cracked open a corrupted archive and discovered the truth the colony had never known. The Council had evaluated Ariath 4 3 years ago and labeled it financially unsustainable, secretly cutting off its atmospheric stabilization funding and diverting the resources to richer worlds, knowing full well that without those stabilizers, the colony's sky would collapse within a decade. The Terran team stared at the screen in disbelief as they read the final Council directive stamped across the file, Ariath 4, non-recoverable. Prepare for quiet dissolution. Do not publicize. And a heavy, suffocating silence filled the control tower because the Terrans realized the colony had never been abandoned accidentally. They had been condemned on purpose, condemned to die quietly so the Council wouldn't have to spend money to save them. Downstairs in the medical shelter, a Terran doctor treating injured colonists felt his hands tremble as the commander relayed the findings across encrypted comms. And around him, alien families looked up with hopeful eyes. Unaware that their own government had chosen their deaths, unaware that their children's suffering had been planned, unaware that the storms killing them were the direct result of the Council's greed. The commander walked out of the tower with heavy steps, his face pale, his jaw clenched, and when the colony governor approached him asking, "Did you find anything? Did the system fail because of age?" The commander hesitated, because delivering the truth felt like stabbing a grieving man in the heart. But Terrans did not lie, not when lives were involved. So he pulled out the recovered data crystal and whispered, voice filled with quiet sorrow, "Governor, your world didn't fail. It was shut down." And the governor's eyes widened as he read the files, his hands trembling violently, breath stuttering as realization dawned. Every cry for help ignored, every distress call erased, every council representative who told them your signals must be glitching. All of it had been a lie, all of it part of a plan to let Ariath die. He sank to his knees, tears streaming down his face as he whispered, "They left us to die. They chose to let our children die." And nearby Terran. Medics stopped working for a moment, their faces darkening with fury so deep it needed no words, because even though humanity had seen cruelty before, even though they knew the galaxy wasn't always fair, this level of cold abandonment, this level of engineered extinction, shook even them to their core. Soon the colonists gathered around, confused, frightened by the governor's collapse, and when he finally forced himself to speak, his voice cracked with a pain that tore through every heart. "The Council wanted us gone. They decided we were not worth saving." And gasps echoed across the plaza as mothers clutched their children closer. Fathers stared at the sky with disbelief turning to rage, and elders whispered prayers asking why their lives had been judged worthless. But before despair could swallow them, the Terran commander stepped forward, his voice firm but gentle, loud enough for the gathering crowd. "Listen to me, you did nothing wrong. You deserved help. You deserved protection. You deserved life." And his words broke whatever was left of the colonists' emotional dam as cries filled the air. Cries of grief, betrayal, anger, heartbreak. But standing among them were Terran officers, steady as mountains, offering comfort, offering warmth, offering the one thing no council representative had ever given them: humanity. Meanwhile, news of the discovery spread across the galaxy like wildfire, and citizens on dozens of worlds, some rich, some poor, learned the truth about the Council's decision, sparking riots, outrage, and demands for justice. Empires turned on the Council, leaders demanded explanations, and children on faraway planets cried as they asked, why did they leave Ariath for to die? While the Council tried desperately to control the narrative, claiming Ariath 4's logs were misinterpreted, outdated, hacked. But their lies failed instantly when Terran ships broadcast the original files across public channels, exposing every hidden directive, every erased call, every calculated decision to let a world suffocate quietly. And through all this chaos, the humans continued their mission, not for revenge, not for politics, but for the simple truth that saving Ariath mattered. In the main medical dome, a young alien girl woke from unconsciousness and whispered to a Terran nurse, "Why did you come, if everyone else left us?" And the nurse, tears in her eyes, replied softly, "Because someone should have come. Because you deserved better." And the child hugged her tightly, whispering, "Thank you for hearing us." And in that moment, the entire meaning of the Terran mission crystallized in the hearts of the colonists and the galaxy watching them. Humanity did not save Ariath 4 for reward, or fame, or politics. They saved it because they heard a cry for help, and chose to answer. The moment the Council's secret files went public, the galaxy reacted with explosive fury, but the Galactic Council chamber descended into pure panic, alarms blaring, diplomats shouting over one another, blaming each other for the cover-up, claiming innocence, claiming ignorance, claiming sabotage. Yet every excuse sounded weaker than the last as billions across the galaxy watched live broadcasts showing humans holding dying colonists in their arms while council representatives hid behind metal walls. And inside that chamber, fear spread like wildfire because for the first time in history the council realized humanity had the moral high ground, and the galaxy knew it. Meanwhile, on Ariath 4, the colonists gathered outside the Terran dreadnought, still shaking from the truth but no longer feeling alone, as hundreds of Terran soldiers formed a protective perimeter around them. not with weapons drawn but with medkits, scanners, and blankets, showing the entire galaxy what real leadership looked like, what real compassion looked like, what real power looked like. Far above, Council warships arrived at the edge of the system, their captains trembling as they received orders to monitor and pressure the Terran forces into withdrawal. But not one captain dared to advance because the Terran dreadnought floating over Ariath IV wasn't just humanitarian machinery. It was a symbol, a warning, a promise, and the energy radiating from its massive hull felt like a silent demand for accountability. A message that humans were done being polite, done being soft, done obeying a council that used power to kill instead of protect. Down on the ground, the colony governor, tired, pale, devastated, stood before the Terran commander with tears still drying on his cheeks and whispered, "Commander, what will the council do now?" And the commander looked up at the darkening sky, where dozens of council ships hovered like vultures, and replied with a calmness that made even the colonists stand straighter, "Whatever they choose. We're not moving." And those 4 words rolled through the plaza like thunder, filling every colonist with a strange, powerful comfort. Because no one had ever stood up to the council for them. No one had ever said we're staying with such confidence. No one had ever treated their lives as something worth defending. The council chairwoman slammed her hands on her desk as she watched the Terran broadcast, shouting, "Send in peacekeepers. Show the humans their place." But her generals refused, their faces pale, because even they knew humanity's silence was more dangerous than their anger. Humans were not shouting, not threatening, not firing. They were simply standing between a dying world and the council that tried to erase it, and that kind of resolve terrified every empire watching. As the council scrambled for control, the galaxy's civilians began choosing sides. Videos flooded social networks of Terrans carrying injured colonists through burning debris, Terrans repairing failing oxygen towers with their own tools, Terrans comforting terrified children while storms raged overhead, and the comments under every video were the same. Why didn't we do this? Why did the council lie? Why are the humans the only ones helping? And slowly, quietly, the galaxy began to turn, their trust shifting away from the council's cold halls and toward the blue-lit shield domes on Ariath IV. Meanwhile, inside the Terran medical dome, an alien mother sobbed with gratitude as her son, who had nearly suffocated hours earlier, sat up breathing clean air for the first time in days, clutching a small Terran-made oxygen mask to his chest like a treasure. And when she approached a human medic to thank her, the medic simply smiled and said, "Your child matters. All of them do," and that simple sentence shattered the last pieces of self-worth the council had destroyed, making the colonists realize they had always deserved this level of care. Someone just needed to give it to them. Soon the entire colony stood outside watching the Terran dreadnought, its soft blue lights glowing like a guardian star, and a strange feeling began spreading through the crowds. Hope. A feeling they had forgotten long ago, a feeling the council had crushed in them, a feeling that now rose like a new sun because humanity had given them a reason to believe again. But far across the stars, the council stared at their failing screens, their trembling reputations, their collapsing authority, and in their fear they made a desperate move. They issued a formal command ordering the Terran fleet to retreat immediately under threat of council sanctions. But when the message arrived at the dreadnought, the Terran commander didn't even blink. He simply stepped outside into the cool night air, looked at the thousands of colonists who were now watching him with tearful, hope-filled eyes, and spoke in a steady voice broadcast across every channel. "We do not take orders that kill the innocent. Not today. Not ever." And his words exploded across the galaxy like a star going supernova, triggering massive protests on dozens of worlds, collapsing entire council communication hubs, and making the colonists cry openly because for the first time in their existence, someone powerful had stood up, not for resources, not for territory, not for personal gain, but for them, tiny forgotten Ariath IV, left to die by the powerful, saved by the humans the galaxy underestimated. And as the Terran commander lowered the transmission, the colonists erupted in cheers, some falling to their knees, some hugging their children, some simply staring at the sky with trembling lips, whispering, "They chose us. They chose to stay." And in that single moment a truth became clear, not only to Ariath IV but to the entire galaxy. If the council represented power without heart, humanity represented heart with power behind it, and that combination terrified every empire watching from afar just when Ariath IV began breathing again under Terran protection. When the sky finally softened and colonists dared to take their first calm breaths in months, the planet's warning systems let out a scream that shook every shelter and dome across the dying world. A superstorm, larger than anything recorded in the colony's history, was forming over the northern hemisphere, a monstrous wall of heat, lightning, and pressure spinning like a living beast, feeding on the broken atmosphere and preparing to unleash devastation powerful enough to wipe out the entire population in minutes, and Terran sensors detected it first, screens filling with red alerts as Terran officers exchanged horrified glances because they knew this storm wasn't natural. It was the direct consequence of the Council cutting off the atmospheric stabilizers 3 years ago, a side effect of their cruelty, a death sentence the humans now had little time to counter. As news reached the colony, fear spread through the streets like wildfire, parents clutching their children, elders kneeling in prayer, people screaming as the sky turned dark green and blue lightning cracked through the clouds like veins of fire. But before panic could tear the colony apart, the Terran commander activated the Dreadnought's emergency broadcast, his voice calm and steady even as the storm grew into a titan above them. Everyone stay inside the shield domes. We will hold the line, and hearing those words, we will hold the line, sent a wave of trembling hope through the colonists, because no one had ever stood between them and death before, no one had ever promised to stay when the sky threatened to kill them. But the humans stood there now, adjusting their armor, tightening their gloves, preparing to fight the planet itself. Above the colony, the Terran dreadnought deployed massive shield generators shaped like glowing blue pylons, each one landing with a heavy thud as energy fields expanded outward, forming a giant protective dome over the city. But the storm was growing too fast, faster than any projections, its winds ripping mountains apart in the distance, its lightning shattering the sky into violent white cracks, and when the first wave slammed into the outer stabilizer towers, the shields flickered violently, humming with strain as Terran engineers shouted updates. Shield integrity dropping. Tower 3 overheating. Atmospheric pressure spiking. And the commander immediately deployed emergency ground teams, sending dozens of human soldiers into the screaming winds to stabilize the towers manually. Colonists watched through cracked windows, tears running down their faces as humans ran into the storm with the same determination they had shown since the day they arrived. Terran soldiers leaning into hurricane-force winds, using their own bodies to shield exposed cables, locking stabilizer pylons back into alignment while lightning struck all around them like vengeful gods, and people sobbed, seeing humans kneel over failing generators with their arms wrapped around overheating engines, screaming into their radios for more coolant, refusing to abandon the towers even as the storm forced them to their knees. Inside the shelters, children clung to their parents, asking, "Will the humans come back?" But the truth was the humans weren't thinking about themselves at all. They were thinking about the thousands of lives behind the shield dome, thinking about the innocent voices they refused to let die, and every time a soldier fell, 2 more rushed into the storm to lift them up. The sky roared like a planet in pain, and the storm smashed into the shield dome with such force that the ground shook, buildings rattled, and the blue barrier screamed with energy, flashes of white jolting across its surface as if trying to rip it open, and the colonists cried out each time the shield dimmed. Terrified this would be their final moment, until a massive silhouette stepped into the storm, larger than any soldier, moving with the weight of a grounded mountain. The Terran Heavy Exo Divisions, 3-story tall armored giants built for frontline disaster response, each step sending shockwaves through the burning ground as they marched toward the failing towers, bracing themselves against the storm and using their colossal shields to protect the stabilizers, their glowing visors reflecting the fury of the tempest. One colonist screamed in disbelief, "They're fighting the storm itself." And in that moment, something inside the people of Ariath broke, not fear, but the sense of worthlessness the Council had forced upon them, replaced now with awe, with gratitude, with a dawning understanding that humanity wasn't saving them out of duty. They were saving them because they chose to, because they believed these lives mattered. As the storm's core approached, lightning struck so violently that the shields buckled, alarms wailed, and Terran engineers screamed, "Shield collapse in 20 seconds." But instead of retreating, the Terran commander sprinted to the front line himself, slamming his palm onto an emergency override, routing the dreadnought's power into the dome in one massive surge that lit the shields brighter than a star flash, making the entire storm reel backward for a split second as the dome roared with unstoppable energy, long enough for the exo units to realign the towers, long enough for the stabilizers to lock into formation, long enough for the humans to hold the line. The storm unleashed its final, deadliest burst, a shockwave so strong it cracked entire mountain ranges in half, but the shield dome, powered by Terran strength and sacrifice, held, shaking, screaming, burning. But it held, and when the storm finally broke apart with a long wailing howl that faded into cold silence, the colony fell utterly quiet, thousands staring at the sky, with wide eyes as the last clouds dissolved into soft blue light cast by the dreadnought. Then, slowly, cries filled the air, not of fear, but of relief, of joy, of disbelief. Families hugging each other, children sobbing into their mothers' arms, elders falling to their knees whispering thank yous to whatever gods they believed in. Because they knew they should have died, they knew the storm should have ended their world, but humanity had refused to let that happen. And as Terran soldiers limped back into the colony, some stumbling from exhaustion, some covered in burns, some carried by their comrades, the colonists rushed to them, lifting them, holding them, thanking them with trembling hands and tear-filled eyes as they whispered the words no one on Ariath had ever imagined saying, "Humans saved us, humans saved our world." And in that moment, the galaxy watching from afar realized something chilling. If humanity could fight a storm like this for strangers, what could they do for their own? Even after the superstorm had passed and Ariath finally tasted clean air for the first time in weeks. Every Terran ship shaking from the power they had poured into the shield dome to keep the colony alive. The real storm was just beginning, not on the planet, but across the galaxy, because the Council could not hide anymore, not after the truth spread faster than light. That they had not just abandoned Ariath, they had planned its death, erased its calls, shut down its stabilizers, and then lied to the galaxy for years to cover their tracks. And now billions of people across 100 systems demanded answers, demanded justice, demanded accountability, but the Council had none, only excuses that fell apart the moment they were spoken. Inside the Terran Dreadnought's command room, the Terran commander stood in front of the recovered data crystal glowing with the Council's secret documents, and as he played the final hidden directive, the one no one had seen yet, the entire room fell into an icy silence. Because the directive did not just condemn Ariath, it revealed a pattern, a system, a policy, non-essential colonies with low tax output, discontinue maintenance support and allow natural termination. A sentence so cold, so cruel, so calculated that even hardened Terran officers clenched their fists, their jaws trembling with fury they barely contained, and the commander, for the first time since arriving on Ariath, closed his eyes in deep, quiet anger, an anger not shouted, not acted upon, but simmering like a star preparing to explode. Meanwhile outside, the colonists were celebrating survival, unaware of the new truth unfolding in the Terran Command Center. The truth that the Council had implemented this policy on other worlds too, that Ariath might not have been the only colony marked for quiet dissolution, and the thought that more innocent children might have been left to suffocate, burn, or starve because of the Council's greed hit the Terrans like a punch to the heart. The commander walked out into the plaza, data crystal in hand, and the colonists saw something strange in his expression. Not pity, not exhaustion, but a soft, steady grief, as if he had been forced to look at something unforgivable. And when the colony governor approached him asking softly, "Is it over? Did the Council only do this to us?" The commander shook his head slowly, and the entire crowd fell silent as he whispered words heavy enough to kill hope. Ariath was not the first. And that sentence shattered the remaining innocence in the hearts of the colonists, elders collapsing to their knees, parents covering their mouths in horror, children clinging tighter to their Terran medics as if afraid the sky would betray them again. In distant star systems, people watched the broadcast with disbelief turning to rage, planets erupting in riots as entire populations realized they could have been next, that the Council saw them not as citizens but as numbers on a ledger, expendable, disposable, forgettable, and in that moment the galaxy shifted. The Council's authority began to rot from the inside. Inside the Council chamber, panic exploded as reports came in of angry mobs outside their embassies, military captains refusing to follow orders, member worlds calling emergency meetings to discuss breaking away, and the chairwoman screamed, "Shut down all Terran broadcasts." But it was too late. The truth was everywhere, unstoppable, irreversible, more powerful than any fleet they controlled. Back on Ariath, the colonists gathered around the Terran commander, hundreds of trembling voices whispering, What will they do to us now? Will the council punish us for surviving? And the commander, standing tall despite exhaustion, despite heartbreak, despite silent rage burning behind his eyes, spoke with the softest, most emotional tone he had used since he arrived. They won't touch you. Not while we stand here. And that sentence washed over the colonists like warm light, replacing fear with something stronger. Trust. A trust they had never given to any power before. Soon after, a Terran ship intercepted a council transmission ordering a blockade around Ariath to re-establish control. And the Terran commander listened to the message quietly, then shut it off without a word, turning instead to his crew and saying, "Prepare defensive shields, not as a threat, not as an act of war, but as a promise to protect those who had no one else." Across the galaxy, other abandoned colonies sent messages of support to Ariath 4, saying, "We stand with you," while civilians across rich council worlds protested in the streets chanting, "No more forgotten worlds," and footage of Terran soldiers fighting the superstorm circulated like a holy symbol of courage. But the council could not understand why this mattered so much to the people. Why humanity's actions were shifting the galaxy's heart. Because they had never realized the truth that seemed obvious to every colonist watching Terran medics cradle injured children with gentle hands. Humans helped not because it benefited them, but because it was right. That truth terrified the council, it unsettled empires, it shook governments. Because for the first time in centuries someone with power was acting. With conscience, and that combination, heart and strength, was something the council had never prepared for. And as night fell on Ariath for once more, the colonists gathered under the blue glow of Terran shield domes, staring at the sky with expressions filled not with fear, but with a rising, dangerous hope, because they knew, in their bones, in their hearts, that the galaxy was changing, and humanity was the reason the truth of the council's crimes spread through the galaxy like a burning chain of lightning. The council made its most desperate and dangerous move yet. They sent an entire fleet to Ariath 4, dozens of warships sliding out of warp with cold silver hulls and weapons that glowed like the eyes of predators, forming a wall of steel across the sky above the fragile planet, and the colonists, who had just survived storms and death and the darkest betrayal of their lives, stared upward in trembling terror, whispering, "They're here to silence us. They're here to erase us again." But before fear could overwhelm them, the massive Terran humanitarian dreadnought lifted itself higher, rising like a mountain of light between the colony and the council fleet, its shields unfolding like wings, its engines humming like a heartbeat, its presence a silent promise that no matter what came next, death, war, fire, darkness, humanity would stand in front of Ariath 4, not behind it. Inside the Terran bridge, officers stood at their stations with calm faces and steady breaths, not because they were unafraid, but because they knew exactly why they were there. Knew exactly whose lives depended on their courage, and when the council fleet broadcast a cold message across the system, Terran forces, "Withdraw immediately. This colony belongs to the council." The Terran commander simply pressed a single button and transmitted a reply so calm it felt like a thunderstorm wrapped in silk. "Ariath 4 belongs to the people who live here. We will not move." And that sentence echoed across the council ships like a slap, like a challenge, like a truth they could not erase. And in a panic, the council admiral barked out orders to activate weapons. But half his captains hesitated, their hands shaking as they saw the Terran broadcast screens showing humans carrying children through fire, humans shielding families during the storm, humans rebuilding a world the council had destroyed. And more than one captain whispered, "Why are we?" pointing guns at the only ones who helped them. On the ground below, thousands of colonists gathered around the Terran shield dome, their hearts pounding. But not with fear this time, with unity, with emotion so powerful it made their chests ache, and slowly, one by one, families stepped closer to the Terran troops lining the plaza, standing beside them, surrounding them, protecting them, as if saying, without words, if the council wants to strike them, they will have to strike us too. And the Terran soldiers, hardened, exhausted, burned and bruised from saving lives for days, felt tears sting their eyes as alien children held their hands, as mothers stood between them and the sky, as elders whispered blessings over them, and in that moment, humanity understood something powerful. They were not alone either. The galaxy was beginning to choose them. Meanwhile, across distant star systems, civilians flooded the streets, protesting in millions, shouting, "Let them be," and humans. Save them, and council lied, their voices shaking governments, toppling political towers, forcing entire empires to issue statements condemning the council. And some worlds even declared that if the council attacked Terrans on Ariath 4, they would cut ties forever, their leaders saying openly, "Humanity showed more honor in 1 week than the council has shown in a century." As the council fleet prepared to open fire, the Terran dreadnought expanded its shields to cover the colony. Completely, glowing brighter and brighter until the whole planet looked like a blue pearl wrapped in human protection. And for a moment, even the council admiral went silent, his breath catching as he saw 1,000 colonists of every shape, color, and species standing arm in arm with Terran troops beneath that radiant dome. Then something happened the council never expected. The colonists began chanting, first softly, then louder, then so powerfully it shook the ground itself, "With you always. With you always. With you always," their voices rising into the sky like a storm of hope, a sound so emotional, so raw, so full of gratitude that even the Terran commander felt his throat tighten. And when the council admiral heard the chant echoing through his warship speakers, his resolve cracked. He had expected fear, silence, surrender, but what he faced instead was unity, a unity the council itself had never inspired. Terran long-range comms lit up with messages from dozens of planets saying, "We are with Ariath 4, we stand with the Terrans, no more forgotten worlds," and for the first time in galactic history, an entire civilization was rallying behind humanity. Not because of fear, not because of technology, but because of what humans had shown. Compassion, courage, sacrifice, heart. In a final act of defiance, the council admiral attempted to order a bombardment, but half his captains turned off their weapons, refusing the command, some even broadcasting publicly, "We will not fire on those who save children," and the council fleet fractured instantly, torn between blind obedience and moral awakening, leaving the admiral shouting orders into a silent comm channel while his own officers refused to slaughter innocents. Seeing the council fleet fall into chaos, the Terran commander opened a system-wide channel, his voice gentle, unwavering, emotional in a way only truth can be. "Power is not measured by how many worlds you rule. Power is measured by who you choose to protect." And the entire galaxy fell silent listening to him, because they knew he was right, because they had seen the proof, because the galaxy had forgotten compassion, and humanity had reminded them. The council ships slowly retreated, one by one, until the admiral's vessel was the only one left, and with no support left to command, he finally turned and fled, leaving the colony untouched, leaving humanity's honor unchallenged, leaving the entire galaxy aware of a terrifying new truth. The council's era was ending, and a new one led by courage, empathy, and humanity, had just begun. When the last council warship vanished into hyperspace and the sky above Ariath 4 returned to a calm blue glow cast by the Terran shield dome, the entire colony stood frozen, not out of fear this time, but out of a quiet, overwhelming realization that they had survived. Not because they were strong enough, not because the galaxy cared, but because humanity refused to let them die. And as the Terran dreadnought lowered itself back toward the planet with slow, gentle thrust of flames lighting the cracked terrain, thousands of colonists rushed forward, tears on their faces, joy shaking their voices, their hands reaching for the humans who had saved their world. Terran soldiers, exhausted and bruised, stood in stunned silence as alien families embraced them one by one, elders bowing with trembling gratitude, children hugging their legs and refusing to let go. Mothers touching their helmets as if trying to memorize the faces behind the visors, and fathers whispering, thank you for giving my child another sunrise." A sentence that struck deeper than any victory cheer, deeper than any anthem, because these were the words of a people who knew they had been forgotten, and now knew what it meant to be remembered. Above them, the Terran commander stepped out onto the dreadnought's lower platform, looking over the colony that had nearly become a graveyard, watching faces lit with emotion he had not seen in years, and for the first time since the mission began. The iron steadiness in his posture softened, his shoulders lowering as if shedding the weight of every life he had carried through fire, and when he spoke, the colony fell completely silent. "Ariath 4, you were never meant to stand alone." And those words rippled through the crowd like warm wind after a lifetime of storms, making thousands burst into tears, because they felt true, deeply true, spoken not out of pride, not out of politics, but out of the kind of empathy that can only come from a species who has known suffering and chosen to rise above it. Meanwhile, Across the galaxy, billions watched the live broadcast with hearts beating faster, some crying. Some whispering prayers, some trembling as they realized humans, those strange, unpredictable, passionate humans, had shown the galaxy what real strength looked like, not the cold strength of fear, but the warm, unbreakable strength of compassion, the kind that holds strangers through fire and says, "I will not let you go." And on dozens of planets, citizens demanded the Council step down, demanded justice for forgotten worlds, demanded a future shaped not by greed but by unity. Back on Ariath 4. The colony governor stepped forward, voice breaking as he addressed the commander. "You saved us, not just our bodies, but our dignity, our belief in kindness. How do we ever repay something like this?" And the Terran commander shook his head slowly, smiling in a soft, human way that made the entire colony lean closer as he whispered, "You don't owe us anything. Just live. Build again. And when you see someone else falling, help them stand." And that line, that soft, simple line, became a spark that would later ignite a movement across the stars. Terran engineers shut down emergency towers, medics packed their kits, soldiers dismantled temporary shield posts, but every time a colonist tried to thank them with gifts or apologies or tears, the humans only replied with the same gentle truth: "You matter, eventually." As the dreadnought prepared to depart, thousands of colonists gathered around its landing field, holding handcrafted lanterns made from the remains of storm-damaged shelters, each lantern glowing with a small blue flame that reflected the Terran colors. And when the dreadnought's engines began to pulse with departure energy, the colonists raised the lanterns high above their heads, illuminating the night in a galaxy of tiny lights, creating a sight so breathtaking that even hardened Terran officers felt their throats tighten. The colony governor sent out a final broadcast, a message that reached every ship, every world, every council hall: "Ariath for lives today because humanity answered a call no one else would." And across the galaxy, millions repeated the words like a prayer: "Humanity answered." As the dreadnought slowly lifted into the sky, its massive silhouette framed by 1,000 glowing lanterns, a small alien child ran forward, tears on her cheeks, waving with all her strength and shouting, "Don't leave us. Please don't forget us." And the commander, hearing her tiny voice through the comms, closed his eyes for a moment, then whispered the final line that would echo through history, the line that would be carved into monuments and taught to children for generations: "We will never forget you. And whenever darkness comes again, humanity will stand with you always." And with those words, the dreadnought ascended, engines lighting the sky like a rising sun, carrying with it the legacy of a moment that changed the galaxy, not through war, not through conquest, but through compassion powerful enough to rewrite destiny, leaving Ariath for not just saved, but reborn, and leaving the galaxy trembling with a new truth. Humanity had become the heart the stars had long forgotten.